Good evening, everybody, and welcome back after the Ben Azmanim. This is 2nd of Elul, Anila Dodi Li, time of closeness to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So let's see what we can do in our continuing our path upwards, getting closer to Hashem, Bezrat Hashem. We were in chapter 19, which are the Chelkei HaChasidus. I mean, again, it needs to be said, we're now into the rarefied atmosphere of Chasidus, the level above what a Jew is required to do. This is for those Yechidei Skula, those people on a high level. But as we said before, even those of us, probably most of us, who are not going to ever achieve these levels in any serious way, but we can still learn, we can still benefit from understanding, first of all, that these levels do exist. And who knows, maybe once in a while we may actually be able to touch for a split second or some point in our life such a madrega, such a level. So we're talking about the divisions of Chasidus, and just to very quickly put us into the context here, he said at the beginning there are three principal divisions of Chasidus, which are basically Maisa. The second is the manner of doing it, the manner of doing the Maisa, the way you do it, how you do it. And then the third one is the Kavanah. The Maisa, the quality of the Maisa, and the intention behind it. And then we said that the deed itself, the Maisa itself, is divided into two areas. One is between Ben Adam L'Chavora, Ben Adam L'Mokom, Hashem, man and God, and the other one between Adam L'Chavera, and the man and his neighbor. And then we basically started talking about Ben Adam L'Chavera first of all. No, sorry, that's not correct. We first of all started talking about Adam L'Mokom, then we moved on to Ben Adam L'Chavero. What the Chasidus requires is to be constantly thinking about how you can benefit somebody else physically, spiritually, doing anything for somebody which will help him, elevate him, give him a sense of security, give him a sense of purpose in the world, helping somebody to emerge from a depression, all of these things. And he's now going to go into, and that's all that he says within the framework of Chesed, Emunas Chasodim, which our sages, Chazal, did not stint in going to great lengths to say how important it is to behave in a way with our fellow man, b'derech chasidus, gomle chasodim, doing kindness. The whole level of chasidus, as we said, chesed is based on kindness. So, and this is not just because the world is a nicer world, it's not just it's not pragmatic at all. It's because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the ultimate bestower of Chesed, and Hashem created us b'tzelem Elokim, be'imitatio Dei, in God's image, and as much as we can, therefore, we fulfill the purpose of our creation to the extent that we're able to mimic, it's not a nice word, to emulate HaKadosh Baruch Hu in terms of the fact that He is endlessly bestowing chesed, v'kol rega v'rega, kol neshima neshima, kol, every single second that Hashem, everything in the world is a chesed, is the bestowal of chesed. The world is a factory which just bestows chesed on us. And of course, so therefore, to the extent that it's possible for us to do as limited human beings, we therefore fulfill our purpose to the extent that we become givers, people whose focus, people who go through life understanding that that's what life is all about. And now he says that Chazal go into great, what's the actual lashon? Cholza hu gemilas asher hifligu chachamim zal b'shvocha u v'chovosenu, in how important it is, and the praise, how praiseworthy it is, and how necessary it is. And as I think we finished off this last week, we talked about Redifa Shalom. It's not just a question of wanting there to exist peace in the world, a person has to pursue it. Now he says, I'm going to bring you statements from Chazal which basically validate and enforce these ideas, and even though they don't really need such substantiation, he's still nevertheless going to bring. The first thing he brings is in the chapter in Ben Ayir, in Megillah. It says, Shalach Talmidim Rabbi Zakkai. The Talmidim of Rabbi Zakkai asked him, why is it that you lived to such an old age? Amalehem, he said, Miyamai, never lo hishtanti b'soch arba amos shel tefillah. I never urinated within 4 amos of tefillah. He was very, and of course in those days, we're not talking about days where there were toilets readily available, lavatories, bathrooms as they call them. So it was the world was physically not as developed, and therefore this was something I assume was quite normal, that a person would have to check when he was davening outside that he wasn't within Daled Amos, or he wasn't facing something which was unclean in any way. V'lo kinisi shem chaveri. Now, I don't know, it's interesting because v'lo hishtanti b'soch arba amos shel tefillah, that doesn't sound to me like the what do you call it, Chasidus. So let me just check that up. It's just struck me now as I was reading this. The second one is, but let me see if I can briefly check in this Sefer where he has lots of on the spot. Yeah, go on, I'm listening.
Technically, like we say, Shem Chaveri could be, if you consider it like Sainus as Amisoi, that could be bordering on the Raisa.
No, I'm talking about the first one, about...
I'm saying either one. Both technically, it would be from Din.
That's what I'm saying. I don't understand what the Chasidus is. He's saying that this is Derech Chasidus, not to be Mishtane B'Dallah Tefillah, but it seems to me that that's something that's Me'ika Adin, whether it's the Rabbana or it's the Oraisa, but it's not something which is a saintly behavior, certainly as I would understand it. I don't see it here. Okay, I don't want to hold this up. Yeah, no, 1 second. Milo, can't find it. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so what does he say in the notes? Doesn't say. Shel tefillah hainu la'achat tefillah va'afilu keshesha kedei chiluk dalad amos hamuta lekuli alma tosfus. So he says that he waited after tefillah, this distance that would take you, I think that's what he means, to travel, to walk Daled Amos. Va'afilu keshesha kedei chiluk dalad amos demuta lekale alma. He personally would not pass water. So it's not something physical. He says tefillah sha'hainu la'achat tefillah. In other words, he waited. The halacha is that a person mustn't go to the bathroom immediately after he's finished tefillah. And I assume by tefillah he means Shmona Esrei. So what he's saying is that even though that me'ika adin, that a person, if he waits the amount of time that it would take for somebody to walk 4 amos, which would be mutar l'kulei alma, that's Tosas over there, he waited a longer period of time. So that's the derech Hasidus. Okay? So that is appropriate to nowadays because we're talking about a time period and not something geographical. I couldn't find this sefer before because somebody took it, but all right. So that's the first thing. Now the second thing is he didn't call somebody a nickname. Now there's, I believe, from what I remember, that when we say he didn't call somebody a nickname, that's a machlokas, whether even if you call somebody a nickname which is not in any way pejorative or denigrating, just to call them, I mean obviously call somebody shorty or fatty, but even if you call somebody, could be even if you shorten their name, could be it's a shiloh if somebody's name is Binyamin, if you call him Benny. I don't know if that's called a kinui, that's a nickname. But he was very makpid to go beyond the letter of the law and to never ever call anybody except by their complete name. Yeah. And I never miss making Kiddush on Shabbos, morning that is, which is the Rabbanon. So this is Harei L'chapa Mina Chasidus B'masha Nogea El Dikdok Mitzvahs. This is Chasidus in terms of the fine points of the mitzvahs. As we said, the first one is waiting a longer period of time than is strictly necessary to pass water after davening. And the second one, as we said, is to never even call somebody by a nickname, even a nickname which is not in any way denigrating him, derogatory. And the third one is that he never missed making Kiddush Hayom on wine. Because if he doesn't have wine, we already know that, and he says that if you don't have wine, then you'll be potter. If you don't have enough money for wine, then you're potter. You don't have to. He doesn't have the money. To a certain extent, but he, nevertheless, even though that he didn't have this he didn't have this money, he had a mother who sold her hat. And she'sricha imo limka kippah shebaroisha. She literally took that cap off her head and sold it. I mean, obviously she didn't do the selling on Shabbos, but whatever it was, she made sure that he had Shabbos morning wine for Kiddush. And this was Omnam Lechvod Kippah Shebarosha Omnam Memidas Achidus Hu Oiseh Kain, that he did this. Now this struck me as very strange, because if anybody did the Chassidus over here, it was the mother. So I went into this a little bit, and I saw an interesting answer. And he brings up this Imoy, Zekena. L'choira harei ha'chasidus hu shel Imoy. If anybody's being the chassid over here, it's his mother who went to the extent of selling the cap off her head to buy him Kiddush wine. So why is it considered that he was the one that demonstrated this chasidus? אבל אם לי היה מבטל מקודש אפילו פעם אחת מחייב לא היה מניח לאמו שתמכור אס כיפה לקנוז יין. It must be that he was so makpid on Kiddush that his mother was prepared, because she saw he never ever gave up from making Kiddush with wine, even once in his life. אבל אם לא היה מבטל בקידוש אפילו פעם אחת מחייב ולא היה מניח לאמו he wouldn't have allowed his mother that she would sell a cup for Kiddush. V'zeui ha'hocha al ad kama masa nafsha b'kol yimei chayav liknos yain l'Kiddush. So you can see from this the fact that he was prepared to let his mother sell her cap, to what extent he must have been up to this point. He never, ever, ever let go for Kiddush. And now we can understand, he says another reason, why Davka and Ima Zakena? Why an old mother? Why not just his mother? The story over there is that he had an old mother who said, L'choira, ma moises legufa, the uvda im haya zakena alo. What do we care if the mother was old or not? Ella, shehi hayasa zakena ra'asa ad kama mosa nafsha al mitzvazu. She was old. She had lived with him for many, 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 many years, and she saw how dear this mitzvah was, that he never ever once didn't make Kiddush on Shabbos morning, which of course is the Rabbanon. Ulefikach machra es akipa shelo kedei shelo yizbatel min ha-mitzvah gam b'pam hazois. And that for that reason she wanted to sell her hat, even though so that she saw how makpid he was, that she was prepared to go ahead and do that. V'sham Gemara, Keshamesa hanicha loy gimel mois garbe yayin. The Gemara over there says that when she died, she left him 300 garbe yayin, I guess it means barrels. And Keshames hu, but when he died, haniach levonov shalosha alafim garbe yayin. When he died, he left his descendants, his children, whatever, 3,000 barrels. Ulahashmi'inu, and to let us hear, ki af lechoira, maisa chasidus shalah hu yosem shaloyu, sharehi machra es kipa shalah. Same question. Isn't it more that her maisa chasidus was more than his? She was the one who sold the kippah. But ach be'emes eino came, but in reality that's not true. Ki ha-chasidus shalah ha-digduk b'shmiris ha-mitzvah shaloi b'chol yemei chayav. Because we see that he bequeathed to his inheritance, in his inheritors, 3,000 barrels. Al maisa hachasidish shalah haya rak pam achas. I'm sorry, I read this wrong. Shal dikul mishmeres mitzvah shaloi. B'kol yemei chayav. Ola al maisa hachasidish shalah shal rak pam achas. Saying slightly different. Her chasidus was one act of selling her cap. His was that every single week, all the years of his life, he was careful to make Kiddush, only with wine. And therefore, he was rewarded 10 times. Her Maisa, what do you call it, Maisa Mesilas Nefesh, of giving up her hat, selling the hat of her head, that enabled her to bequeath 300 barrels of wine. But his, we see the fact that he was able to bequeath 3,000 barrels of wine indicated that his Maisa was more Mesilas Nefesh. Yeah. Kizcharer haya gimel mo'es. Her reward was 300. Uscharo gimel alofim, and his reward was 3,000. Okay, so that's again an example of how far he was prepared to go in order to be on a Shabbos. And he brings an interesting Maisa down here from the Skulina Rebbe, Zatzal. The Skulina Rebbe, I'll just translate, I won't read the Hebrew. He had a serious heart attack on Erev Shabbos. And he was rushed off to a hospital in a great rush. And when they got there, Baruch Hashem, he was okay. He was, it came out because of the great quickness that they sped him off to hospital, that he hadn't brought with him Big Day Shabbos. He obviously, he was okay, but he was in the hospital. So he asked, the Rebbe asked, the Tzal asked the people who brought him to hospital, maybe one of you has brought anything, any Shabbos clothing with? And one of them said that he brought with him a fresh shirt for Shabbos. And he said, the Rebbe said, Anna, Bevakasha mimcha, I ask of you, ten li es hakatonos, give me the shirt, vani eten lecha betruma kol ma shetirsa, and I will give you anything you want in return. How dear was the covet of Shabbos to him. Same idea as that even when you're potter from having to make kiddush on wine, because you don't have the money for it. Another example of how great people are very medactic, and mechabed Shabbos, mechabed the mitzvahs. It's an interesting story. The mashkiach of Kol Torah, Rav Gedalia Eisman, Zeichet Zal Levracha, once he asked Rav Yecheskel Abramsky Zatzal, who was living in Bayit Vegan towards the end of his life, and he lived right back next door to the yeshiva. Why was it he didn't come and daven on Yom HaNoroim in the yeshiva in Kol Torah? So Rav Abramsky Zatzal replied to him, he wasn't able to do that. He couldn't do that. Why? And Rabbi Galadia said, why can't you? Why can't the Rav come? So Rabbi Cheskel, because obviously it was clear it wasn't because of, like it was a long way away or anything. So Rabbi Ramsky answered him, says that the minhag of Kol Torah was the minhag of the Yotze Germania, the Yekisha minyan, minhag, and they dalgim me'uma. They don't skip anything on Yom HaNoroim. Now, if you've ever looked at the Machzor and you've seen how long that is, it's, there's a lot of things that in the Litvisher world generally we I won't say we want to skip it, but the tradition is that we don't say all of the piyutim, all of the tefillot. But in Kol Torah apparently they did. So Ella Omrim Eskol Hakosav b'Machzor. They say everything that's written in the Machzor. So, and they also say everything standing up. He was already old, and he didn't have the ability to stand for that kind of length of time. So the Mashkiach, Gedalia Eisman Zatzal, said, well, if so, if the Rav has to sit, you should sit down. You're not mechuyev to stand. Again, like our story with the wine. If you don't have the wine, you're not mechuyev to make kiddush over wine if you can't afford it. So Rabbi Cheskel said, you think, I don't know what's written in Maseches Derech Eretz. It says, Lo yehe odam yoshev bein ha'omdim. A person who shouldn't sit down while other people are standing. Rona. Look. Mi ela ha'omdim. Who are these people who are standing up? Tzeirim, young people. And who's sitting down? Harav Ramamsky, who is Zakein v'Godol. Uma bekach im hu yoshev. So what if he sits down? V'chi hu oseh kein machmas hatanuk. Is he doing this because of pleasure? For sure not. Hello, kol echad mevin shehu zakein. Everybody understands, everybody knows that he would be sitting down because it's difficult for him to stand up. So vadei sha'al pi hamatzav shalo hu haya yochol l'shevet. So for sure, nobody's going to think that Rabbi Yecheskel sitting down just to take it easy. They understand he wasn't capable of standing up, if he would go. Va'afilu lifnei amispalel. And even in that situation, it would be permitted for him to sit down in front of somebody who's davening if he can't stand up. Because why? He's old, he's infirm, hasn't any koyach. Va'afal pi came, but nevertheless, gam b'matzav kazeh, nag Rav Abramsky was noheg ba'oifen shel lo yeh odem yoshev bein ha'omdim. A person doesn't sit down if other people are standing, even with that. And that's a very good example of modern day Hasidus in terms of the story we mentioned here. Okay, let's maybe just go on a little bit further. So they asked Reb Shalu Talmidei es Rabbi Elazar ben Shemua, B'ma arachti yomim. how did you, Reb Elazar ben Shemua, lengthen your lives? How come you were zoichet such a long life? Am lahem, he said to them, Miyomai lo asisi kapandria lebeis hakneses velo posati al roshi am kodesh. What this means is that he never made a shortcut by using a shul. For example, in the base medrash here, it might be a problem if you wanted to, let's say, go to the office and you cut through the base medrash in order to go up the stairs on the other side. That would be called making a kapandria. It's not covered the base medrash to use it as a shortcut, even if you're going to have to go a longer way around. And the other thing was that he never trod above the heads of the holy people, meaning when everybody was sitting at the feet of the Rebbe learning, as they used to sit on the floor, he never got up, he never walked through them, because that wasn't considered to be covered. As he says in the first instance, he was being mechabed the base hamedrash. Hine zeh sidus be'inin kavod base hakneses ve'inin kavod habrios. And the second one, in other words, that was between Adam lemokum, and the second one was between Adam lechaveiro, not to get up and walk through people while they're sitting in their studies on the ground. Shelo lifsoya al gab mesiboson. Shelo lereos ke mavaza oison. Because that looks in some way like you're being mavaza them, not treating with proper respect. Od sham shalol tamid shel Rebbe Preda. B'meh harachti yomim. Same question. How did you, Rebbe Preda? How were you for such a long life? Lo kodamni odam lebeis hamedrash. Nobody ever got to the base of medrash before me. V'lo berachti lifnei kohen. And I never said probably we're talking about Birkas Hamazon if there was a kohen there. V'lo achalti mibehema shelo hurumu matnoseo. And I never ate from an animal that its parts, this thing we're talking about probably from the part of a korban, which would be mutter for the bailim to eat, before the Kohen had eaten, had taken his parts. Now, it's not, of course, like truma that's given to the Kohen from tevel, from unmeised, untithed grain or produce, where there's an issa d'oraisa. There's no issa d'oraisa of eating the from the korban, if the Kohen hasn't yet got his truma, whatever parts of the sacrifice that he's going to get. But again, this is midas chasidus. That's not to do that, not to eat until the Kohen gets his. Again, it's midas chasidus not to bench, I guess, even if you're a choshev person, if there's a Kohen there. And the first thing he said was that he never nobody ever preceded him into the Beis HaMikdash, Beis HaMidrash, to the study hall. So, I remember a story about Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal. When somebody asked him how he was able to be so matzliach in his learning to become who became, and one of the things I heard was that he said he always would arrive 10 minutes before the shir and 10 minutes and stayed 10 minutes afterwards. I think experience bears out that it's amazing how if you arrive even a little late for davening or for the shir or for whatever it is, it's a whole different thing. The whole of the rest of the experience sort of follows on after that beginning. And if you get to davening even 5 minutes earlier, it's just a different davening. I was thinking maybe we'll end on this note. That's something that's pretty easy to do in Elul, is to make sure that we're on time for things. It's in Elul one wants to try and find things that you can fix up and start with the easy things. So that's something I would suggest we could work on, is just to make sure if we're not already doing it. If you're already doing it, of course, then you have to find something else. But if it's something, if it's a challenge for you to arrive, and of course the psychology is, well, what do I want to get there? Whatever. Say davening starts at 7:15. Why should I get there at 5:07? It'll be, I have to wait around for everybody, and it's amazing. I always find whenever I get early to something, it always ends up that I actually arrived on time, because whatever, benzer, one way or another, it kind of ends up that really you're just on time. It's, by the time everything gets going. Maybe that's just something personal, because maybe I'm a bit slow in things. But I would certainly suggest that maybe in Elul, that's something that, as we saw here, this is a way that we can, certainly from the story of Rav Shlomo Zalman, this is a tremendous segula that goes along with psychologically, I think you're prepared. It's a different kind of experience when you arrive early to when you arrive late. It's a different experience when you rush out at the end and where you finish and let it all come down and you're ready to leave. And also, it's on the other side of it, of course, it's showing HaKadosh Baruch Hu that it's important, that He's important to you, that you're coming to His house and you didn't just rush in at the last minute or turn up late. And that's an insult. I'm not saying that, chas v'chalila, that people don't have good reasons to come late, but I'm not sure they have good reasons all the time. I'm not sure we all have good reasons all the time. And again, it's one of these habits that it's very easy to get into, is to, and I think something at Elul, that's something we could really maybe try to make sure we arrive 5 or even 10 minutes early. And as I said, I think you'll find that you didn't really arrive early at all in the first place. Okay, we'll stop here and carry on next week. B'ezras Hashem.